Hello, everyone watching at home. My name is Howard Williams, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Today, I'll be doing a short, persuasive speech, and I'd like to start that speech by posing a question to you. What if I told you that 70 to 80% of the food that's produced and consumed in the United States is genetically modified? Would that concern you? What if I said that one of the most powerful companies in the United States is doing everything that they can so that you don't even know the food's been genetically modified? If the hair on your arm isn't standing up just yet, then allow me to go into a little bit more detail about what exactly is in the food that you and your family are consuming. Also, why food companies and some government officials will prefer you to not know when your food's been genetically modified. And lastly, why I believe the United States should suspend the production of genetically engineered food until proper research can be conducted. Let's begin with what are GMOs? GMOs are genetically modified organisms that are created inside of laboratories, and typically they use plants and animals whose DNA has been spliced with the DNA of other plants, other animals, other bacteria, and viruses. And there's two major products that come from GMOs. The first is genetically modified seeds that are more resistant to herbicides, which are the extremely toxic chemicals that are used to kill weeds that will otherwise kill the crops. The second is genetically modified plants that are more resistant to insecticides, which are the toxic chemicals used to kill insects that would harm the plants. And the purpose of these GMOs is to help the crops grow faster than normal, or in climates that they wouldn't normally grow, or to yield more per seed or per crop than it would be if it were organic seeds. One of the byproducts of these genetically engineered seeds is superweeds. Superweeds don't have superpowers, or they're not going to have a Marvel movie coming out anytime soon. But one of the reasons superweeds pose a problem is because they have cross-pollinated with these genetically engineered seeds that are so resistant to these toxic chemicals. So when you have a plant that's resistant to toxic chemicals that pollinates with a weed that's resistant to toxic chemicals, how do you kill the weed? Well, you have to use more potent and more amounts of these toxic chemicals on these crops that you and I are eventually going to eat. So in just the 20 years that GMOs have been prominently used in the United States, the amount of toxic herbicides that these plants are treated with has increased 15 times, and that's in just 20 years. The top 5 crops that are genetically engineered are corn, canola, soy, sugar beets, and cotton. Now, if you're looking at this list and thinking, well, I don't eat soy, I don't know what a sugar beet is, and I definitely haven't eaten any cotton, that may be true. But these crops eventually become ingredients like sugar, oil, and corn syrup. And if you know anything about corn syrup, it's in everything. But these ingredients are included in no less than 70% of the packaged foods that you and I are buying from the supermarket. And just about everything in the supermarket is packaged and processed. So it includes these altered ingredients. Attitudes about GMOs across the world are basically uniform, with the exception of North America. As you can see on this image, there are heavy restrictions or outright bans of GMO production all across the world, including every country in Europe. While in North America, the United States has no requirement to label foods that's been genetically engineered, and there are no restrictions whatsoever on producing them. In fact, most of the countries you see here that have a green circle above them won't even import these foods from the United States. With that said, there is widespread domestic support for GMO labels in the United States. This image here has a lot of figures and numbers on it, but there's a few I pulled out. Firstly, there's support for labeling across political affiliations. Secondly, more than 90% of Americans support labeling when foods have been bioengineered. Every state has majority support for labeling these foods. And more importantly, Americans almost never agree on anything. So if Republicans and Democrats and independents all agree that they want to know what's in the food that they're eating and that they're giving to their families, then it must be a very important issue. So considering the United States doesn't have any mandatory laws for labeling, but there's so much support for it, one would wonder, what is the discrepancy? Meet Republican Congressman from Kansas, Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo does not want you to know when the foods you're buying have been genetically modified. Mike Pompeo has received contributions and donations for his campaigns from the likes of Monsanto, which is the same company that has a monopoly on the genetically engineered seed market. Because of those contributions, Mike Pompeo introduced HR 1559, dubbed the Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act, which prohibits mandatory labeling of genetically modified foods. You should not trust Mike Pompeo. But it's not just seeds and crops that receive this genetic treatment, because that same company, Monsanto, that supports Mike Pompeo, they also produce Roundup feed. So this is feed that's given to pigs and cows and chickens all across the United States that produce the meat that we buy all year. There was a study done in France, the most comprehensive safety assessment to date, on the effects of this Roundup feed when given to live rats, which are often used in these type of studies. The results were not very confident. The rats in the study ended up developing mammary tumors, kidney and liver damage, premature deaths, and liver congestion and necrosis that were 2 to 5 times higher than the rodents in the control group that were just fed organic feed. Now, the image I chose here was a little bit more pleasing to look at because the images of the rats that actually survived the test were too gruesome and grotesque for me to display in this particular presentation. So in conclusion, GMOs are everywhere, and we as Americans have a right to know when the food that we're buying has been genetically altered. GMOs have only been prominent for about 20 years, and it's not enough time to know the long-term effects on the health of a human. Right now, you and I as Americans are the test subjects of genetically altered foods, not unlike the rats from this previous slide. Companies like Monsanto trade cash for favorable research to be published to further their causes, and they're $1 million company. So independent researchers who have to fund their own research really do not stand a chance. And lastly, the United States should suspend the use of these genetic experiments until irrefutable evidence can be presented. Once again, my name is Howard Williams. Thank you for taking the time for watching this presentation, and I hope you keep that in mind the next time you're at the supermarket. Take care.